Hello, I'm Brad Carmack. This presentation, Why Mormonism Can Abide Gay Marriage, was given on August 6th of 2011 at the Sunstone Symposium. I've reproduced it here so that I can put it on YouTube. We'll go ahead and start with the outline. We're going to go in 4 parts to give this presentation. First, we'll show the church's anti-gay marriage stance, using a little bit of evidence and some documents. Second and third is where we'll spend most of the time on this presentation. We're going to talk about a moral argument for gay marriage in the church. We're first going to look to by their fruits arguments. We, of course, remember that Jesus said that you shall know them by their fruits, suggesting the most common moral reasoning that we use, which is to look at the consequences of a proposed course of action to determine the morality of that action. Third, we'll talk about doctrinal arguments. We'll take a look at the family proclamation, as well as a number of scriptures and statements by church leaders, and then we'll conclude. First, a little bit about me. I am a biologist. You can see there on the right the book that I wrote last year. It's entitled Homosexuality, A Straight BYU Student's Perspective. And on the left, you can see an article that appeared in February of this year in the Q Salt Lake, which is a newspaper magazine for the GLBT community in Salt Lake. The first half of my book talks about the science of sexual orientation, looks about what causes homosexuality, how changeable sexual orientation is, and then the second half talks about gay marriage issues. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to presume that you have a basic understanding of terms like intersex and transgender, and that you have a basic understanding of the biology of sexual orientation. You may choose to research these things on your own if you're not as familiar with them. We're going to talk about this couple a little bit later. I just wanted you to know that Taylor and Jessica, they're a Colorado couple, and they've been dating for about a year and a half, fell in love with each other, and they would like to get married. So we'll talk a little bit more about Taylor and Jessica later on. Okay, so first we'll start out with our outline. We're going to talk a little bit about the church's anti-gay marriage stance, which many in this audio audience will likely be familiar with. First, from the 2010 Church Handbook of Instructions, Book 1 has a section on same-gender marriages and affirms that the church affirms defining marriage itself as the legal and lawful union between a man and a woman. Also in that same book, in that same section, sexual relations are proper only between legally and lawfully wedded spouses. And so those sexual relations between individuals of the same gender are sinful and undermine the divinely created institution of the family. So far it seems pretty clear that the church is against gay marriage and against sexual relations between individuals' sex. The title for this presentation is sort of a response to this article in Sunstone a number of years ago by Chris Bigelow. The title is Why Mormonism Can't Abide Gay Marriage. Of course, this presentation is Why Mormonism Can Abide Gay Marriage. You'll see that there's a little equation here. A man plus a woman equals kids. It's a common procreation argument used to argue against same-sex marriage. We'll talk a little bit more about that subsequently. Also, we know there's been public opposition to same-sex marriage legislation in Alaska, Hawaii, and California. There are, of course, a number of scriptures that are used to argue that same-sex conduct is sinful. There's the recent Family Proclamation of 1995, and a number of statements by church leaders over the years condemning homosexual conduct. So, bottom line, that gay marriage does not seem to fit within Mormonism. Now, I'm going to argue that it does. I think that that argument is ultimately a successful one, but I acknowledge that it's a difficult one. The mountain we're seeking to scale here is a steep incline. Okay, so placement in the presentation. We've talked about the church's anti-gay marriage stance. We're now going to go into the consequential moral arguments for gay marriage. I'm going to call these by the fruit arguments. If gay marriage is a tree, what are the fruits of that tree? Naturally, we look at the fruits or consequences of gay marriage within the church. I'll let the audience decide if those fruits are good or bad. Okay? And of course, my precedent for this this is a quote from, I believe, Wayne Scow. And of course, you're welcome to email me to find all my references. My book goes into much greater depth, has 600 plus footnotes, kind of detailing my sources and other deeper arguments. But here we'll just note that Christ taught us to evaluate attitudes and actions not by their conformity to the letter of a generalized law, but rather according to their compatibility with the spirit of love and the degree to which they promote self-development. You recall that the Savior taught, you shall know them by their fruits. So what's the first fruit? The first fruit is human love. I would note that homosexual orientation, a lot of times people think it's all about sex, but homosexual orientation is a lot like heterosexual orientation, meaning it's a whole bunch of things usually. It's romantic, sexual, emotional inclinations, and that orientation can be a basis for a stable relationship. It causes the partners to be interested in each other, sexually and romantically and emotionally. It causes them to be bound, to make a united whole out of two independent parts. Of course, we're familiar with that with heterosexual marriage, and many of us that know same-sex couples are familiar with that expression in same-sex couples. But how does that orientation, homosexual or heterosexual, buttress the stability of a relationship, including a marital one? Well, I think that a couple of the main reasons that do revolve around sex and romance. During sexual arousal and also during orgasm, both men and women have neurochemicals released in their brains, including oxytocin, which is the human bonding or relationship chemical, causes one to trust and feel close to another, and also dopamine, which is a pleasure neurochemical. And of course, for most of us listening to this will be familiar with emotions of romance and of friendship and companionship. So a homosexual orientation, because it's not just about sex, it's also about love and intimacy, companionate love, romantic love, sexual love. All those can help to make a relationship between two individuals, a same-sex couple, more stable. And as I'll argue later, there's a lot of reasons why society, and also as a church, as a subset of society, and its own religious community is interested in stable marital relationships, both for the partners and for the children that might enter into the families. Okay, a second point or fruit here, again we're looking at consequences. Same-sex marriage is consensual. There's a lot of sexual preferences out there. There's some people have a preference for those that are older, some towards those that are younger. Some people have an orientation towards those of the same sex or the opposite sex. Some people are asexual. When it comes to homosexual orientation, it's very much similar to heterosexual orientation, and that it's usually towards adult individuals that are capable of consenting, and oftentimes, of course, same-sex relationships, if not always, are consensual with those that are both partners are homosexually oriented. So the stability of those relationships is buttressed and aided not only by the orientation but also by the consent of theirs. Kind of a common sense consideration there. Also, this is a news article about a gay couple that stayed together for 50 years plus. This couple, of course, wasn't aided by the institution of marriage, since most jurisdictions haven't opened up marriage to same-sex couples until recently. However, this type of a couple could well become more of the rule rather than the exception, much as we see a lot of stable marriages, although obviously there's been an elevated divorce rate in recent decades, or at least a high divorce rate, if not also elevated. The bottom line is that same-sex couples can be stable, and that both within the church and in society more generally, we're interested in those stable couple relationships. Alright, so the church is pro-family. I hope I don't have to support that proposition with too much data, but for those familiar with the church, know that the church is very interested in pro-family arguments. But celibacy is definitely an anti-family institution. There's a picture here of a man on a bench, and there are definitely a lot of homosexual-oriented members of the church, both men and women, who cannot in good conscience propose to somebody of the opposite sex. And it doesn't leave them a whole lot of options. That means they can either enter into same-sex relationships and risk being kicked out of the church, or they can remain celibate for their whole lives. Of course, there's some demographic slice that chooses to be celibate, and that's an anti-family outcome. So gay marriage creates this option that's a family option, rather than preventing that family option by encouraging celibacy, since there's not another viable alternative for those that have a persistent and predominant homosexual orientation. Alright, so let's take a look at the procreation argument. Again, we're looking at the consequences of gay marriage in the church, the fruits. This is again from Chris Bigelow's Why Mormonism Can't Abide Gay Marriage article. You can see you've got monogamous on the left, man plus woman equals children, polygamous on the right, man plus several women equals more children, and then a question mark with a woman plus a woman. Oftentimes the argument is used, we shouldn't allow gay marriage in society or definitely in the church because these couples cannot produce children naturally. Well, We know from the Church Handbook of Instructions that sexual relations are not only for the purpose of procreation. We know that they're also as a way of expressing love and strengthening bonds. We talked about that earlier, that sex and romance can increase the unity of a couple, and that can apply equally to same and opposite gender couples. And of course we know there's a lot of heterosexual or opposite sex couples out there that are infertile. In fact, there's probably more, given the numbers that we have on infertility, infertile couples where at least one or both partners are infertile than there are same-sex partners. And we have no problem, of course, with men and women getting married when one or both partners is infertile. And if the woman has a hard time ovulating or the man has an abnormally low sperm count, we don't use that as a reason to bar them from marriage. So in that way, same-sex couples are much like any infertile married couple. And they, of course, stand to benefit from the sexual aspect of the relationship, as do other infertile opposite-sex couples. Continuing on the procreation argument, also we know, and Valerie Hudson, I think, put it well. She's a LDS feminist, a Mormon scholar. She talked about procreation being the fruit, not the root, of marriage. And we know that when two people get married, we don't wait to call them married until the first kid comes along. They're married after the performance of the marriage ceremony. And marriage is definitely not predicated upon the ability or the event of procreation. Someone could ask a question about the same-sex couple. Do they misunderstand the purpose of marriage, if indeed the purpose of marriage is to bear children naturally? We could ask the same question of this couple, because is also, like the couple before it, incapable of producing children naturally. And of course we could, in that place, instead of this older couple, we could put a 30-year-old couple, a man and a woman, where one or both are infertile and they need reproductive technologies to help them to have children, or indeed may choose not to have children. But it has no effect on whether or not that couple is or should be married. Last on this procreation argument piece, same-sex couples are capable of reproduction. This is an article from 2010 where a mouse has two and only two biological parents, two male mice. If you were to take a man, for instance myself, and take a cheek swab, put a little toothpick in your cheek, on the end of that toothpick would be some cells. And each one of those cells has every genetic instruction needed to manufacture a human egg. Of course, I've confirmed this with a number of scholars, but you can make the intuitive deduction yourself. Males and females have all the same genes except for that last 23rd, where women have an XX and men have an XY. Women, the second X of that XX pair turns into a bar body that's not used, and about the only gene that's useful on the Y is the SRY gene that helps to produce a male. So all male same-sex couples have every genetic instruction needed to make both boys and girls. Female couples have every genetic instruction needed to make baby girls, with no needed contribution from the opposite gender. In fact, if I had a same-sex partner, you could take a cheek swab from me, make the cell go into a pluripotent state, stimulate it to go down oogenesis and make it an egg, and then you could fertilize that egg with the sperm from my partner, and we would have a child that has two and only two biological parents, me and my same-sex partner. So that's a common error that people think same-sex couples can't reproduce. Much like opposite-sex couples that are infertile that need reproductive help, same-sex couples merely need a little nudge from the lab. Alright, let's talk about another fruit or consequence of marriage. There's a whole litany here, and I'm only going to highlight a few, but compared to unmarried people, married people experience less depression, have fewer alcohol problems, are more productive, they earn more, they live longer, and it's reasonable to expect that these same benefits will accrue to same-sex couples, the individuals, the partners of those couples, as it does in opposite-sex marriage. Another benefit of gay marriage would be the parenting that these same-sex couples do. Now there's kind of two sides to this equation. Both the children benefit from having a same-sex couple raising them be married as compared to cohabitation. We know there's a lot of evidence showing that married couples produce more valued results in their children. For instance, the crime level of the children are lower, their education levels are higher, their self-confidence levels are higher, etc., when their parents are married rather than cohabiting. It's likely that these same consequences will accrue for the children if the same-sex couple raising them is married rather than cohabitating. And additionally, we know that there are benefits that the partners themselves, the parents, experience from being married rather than cohabiting. Got a couple pictures here of some same-sex families. And although there's not a ton of research, some of the early studies indicate that the child-rearing outcomes as measured by things such as social adjustment and educational attainment and crime levels, same-sex parents do just as good and sometimes better on average than opposite-sex parents. Alright, let's talk about another fruit or consequence of having gay marriage in the church, and I think this is the number one reason to support gay marriage in the church, and it's about providing reliable caregivers. And there's a lot of norms that go along with marriage. One of them is fidelity. Another one is that marriages are supposed to be lifelong, of course in the church beyond that as well. But if marriage means anything in the broader culture, and including within LDS society, it means that you're there for each other, in the good and the bad, the rough and the smooth, the sickness and in health, as the popular marriage ceremony reads. And so this means that over a lifetime, rather than being celibate, you've got individuals that are taking care of each other. So a lot of times if you've got an individual and they have needs, they have a rough day at work, they need to come home and talk to somebody, rather than going throughout life and having a lot of those needs neglected or picked up by the state or by extended family, they're going to be taken care of by their spouse. And it's a mutual thing because they're going to be taking care of the spouse in return. It's a very efficient equation, and it's one of the reasons that society values marriage, and one of the primary reasons why I am pro-marriage. In fact, that's why I'm making this presentation in the first place, is because I'm pro-family. But along this same argument, there's a great quote from Jonathan Rauch. He wrote Gay Marriage, Why It's Good for Gays, Good for Straights, and Good for America. He says, a husband or wife is the social worker of first resort, the psychiatrist of first resort, the cop and counselor and insurer and nurse and 911 operator of first resort. And if you think about the marriages and families that you know, and some of you, of course, listening to this are married, think about how often you meet or have your needs met by your partner. And that same beneficial relationship can take place within a same-sex marriage. Okay, let's talk about another fruit or consequence out of settling young men. Got a picture here of some men that are young men are up to no good. One thing that we know about young men over the course of history, and this is kind of a common wisdom argument, is that men need to be civilized. They need to have some sort of institution to help socialize them. They're testosterone, they are strong, they are ambitious, and one of the greatest civilizing institutions that we have for young men is marriage. The stat here is that between 24 and 35, unmarried men compared to married men are 3 times as likely to murder another male, rape and rob, and have a number of other risks. And of course, gay young men stand to benefit from marriage, as do straight young men. And as noted before, within the church, there's a disproportionate number of gay men that choose to be celibate with those that remain, because that's one of their prime options. They can try to marry a woman, or they can be celibate, or if they choose a same-sex relationship, oftentimes they leave the church either willingly or unwillingly. So one benefit, of course, is that the young men would choose marriage. Another fruit or consequence of gay marriage, take a comparison here to the lifting of the priesthood ban in 1978. As racism became less and less popular, and legal institutions and social institutions increasingly rejected racism, it caused more and more tension that the church would give the priesthood to non-black men, but not to black men. Think about if today still the church held to that line and wouldn't give the priesthood to black men. I mean, part of the problem, of course, is determining who's black and who's white. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. It's not always easy to determine who's male and who's female, and that's very relevant, but just the societal tolerance for racism, and the comparison here is, of course, the societal tolerance for heterosexism. That tolerance is decreasing. Of course, in the short term, the church will probably lose some publicity points for being inconsistent, but in the long term, they're going to look better for aligning with the better supported moral position, which, as I'm arguing here, is in favor of gay marriage. Another fruit or consequence of having gay marriage in the church is to think of all the men that sit on disciplinary councils, and they have a faithful member of their congregations, oftentimes who the person on the council is known for years and knows them to be have advanced spiritually during their time, to be a great contribution and of great value to the ward that they attend. And there's no doubt that a number of these men are anguished by understanding their story, understanding their situation, knowing the person, and disciplining, excommunicating, disfellowshipping the member who chooses to enter into a same-sex relationship. And so those anguished and conflicted men that let the hammer fall would no longer have to inflict those oftentimes grievous wounds, very hurtful to excommunicate someone, on those members. And additionally, of course, the gay people themselves wouldn't be excommunicated and disfellowshipped as often for choosing to try to increase their spiritual development through the unity and experiences that attend marriage, including that to a same-sex spouse. So here you've got the relieved gay members, many of you that know gay people in the church, and this is the reason I got into these issues and to researching them, because I'm straight and I'd never really had homosexual issues on my radar until a few years ago, but I started to read some of the stories about the conflicted gay Mormons and the difficulties that they had, many of them pretending to be straight, a long time in the church, including today. Merely being homosexually oriented was heavily stigmatized. There's been a reluctance on the behalf of a number of church leaders to acknowledge the existence of homosexual orientation, to acknowledge the causes of homosexual orientation, which are primarily prenatal hormones and genes, account for most of the variability there. But a lot of these gay members would no longer have to be as duplicitous, especially the ones in mixed orientation marriages, wouldn't need to pretend to be straight, and oftentimes could live with greater integrity. So that would be another consequence or fruit of gay marriage in the church. Second one is that those that are open about their orientation, that aren't living a double life, but nevertheless feel a lot of despair and frustration as they consider their future. I have gay Mormon friends of mine that are celibate and single, and they contemplate their future, and they're not really sure what to do, because they know that if they choose a same-sex relationship, it will affect their church membership often and their status. There's a number of them, as I'm sure you know, with just heartbreaking stories about self-loathing, about rejection by families or by church leaders, about their sense of belonging in the Mormon community. And I think that gay marriage is likely to bring about a communication of the message that it's okay to be gay, and that homosexual orientation can be applied towards valuable ends, namely same-sex marital relationships. Another fruit or consequence, think about the straight spouses in mixed orientation marriages, both the husbands of lesbian women and also the wives of gay men. Oftentimes they're more in the closet than their spouses are, and categorically they on average have very difficult experiences, not all of them of course, but oftentimes there's divorce, hardship, and just very difficult strains on the marriage that come from this mismatch of orientation. And you want to think about the children in those relationships as well. Think of all the children of divorces where the same-sex orientation of one of the parents was a prime factor in the conflicts that led to the divorce. So with same-sex relationships and marriages, for those that have a predominant and persistent homosexual orientation, the children are likely to be raised by two parents that don't have a mixture of orientations. And that's likely to reduce some of the suffering of the spouses and children in those families. Another consequence of gay marriage in the church, more gay people are going to stay within the LDS communities. And think about age 80. Homosexual-oriented people, by the time they're age 80, what percent of them are still in the church? And that percentage is much lower than those who are straight. And so it's likely that more gay people are going to stay within the LDS communities that they were raised in. And indeed, there are also those who would join the church, but for the church's stances on homosexuality and gay marriage. There's some slice of those converts that will choose to join where they wouldn't otherwise. I know of a missionary or a potential missionary, that decided not to serve a mission because of the church's stance. If it weren't for that stance, he would have served his mission. So there are those that leave the church because their family members or friends are gay and they don't appreciate the church's stance. They find it morally objectionable. There are those people that are more likely to stay in if the church reverses its stance and instead embraces the institution of gay marriage. Okay? We also want to think about the children of gay and lesbian families where they have a same-sex couple as the parents. Oftentimes those couples don't remain in the church, which means that their children, who of course stay with the parents, are not inside the nurturing, welcoming, and I would say very valuable LDS communities and their wards. So there's those children that end up growing up outside the church and oftentimes don't return to the church. Those children would instead grow up inside it. We talked about the converts there as well. All right, another consequence or fruit of gay marriage. A lot of times parents are worried about their gay children entering into mixed orientation marriages, especially if they know people that have been to mixed orientation marriages. They realize that oftentimes adds a elements or a level of difficulty compared to marriages that don't have a mixed orientation. Of course, most children don't hope for their children to have a lifetime of lonely dinners. I've got a picture here imagining a person that dies at age 90 who's gay and decided they couldn't in good conscience marry someone of the opposite sex, and so they stayed celibate their entire lives. It's kind of a lonely picture, and of course parents generally they want their children to have the opportunity to be married in a stable, healthy, and happy marriage. And so that's one fruit or consequence. Another one is basically the same, but from the perspective, instead of the parents, from the perspective of the children. Most children want to have a chance to have a stable, healthy, and happy marriage. Most people don't want to be celibate for their whole lives, although of course some do. And a lot of gay people in the church are loath to enter into a mixed orientation marriage. They're just not really that interested in individuals of the opposite sex and are worried about how that's going to affect the happiness of their spouse, the health of their family, etc. Okay, so this concludes our discussion looking at moral arguments for gay marriage by judging the fruits or consequences of gay marriage. Of course, I'll leave it up to you to decide if, as a whole, the consequences of gay marriage are positive or negative. Okay, so here's our outline. We talked first about the church's anti-gay marriage stance. We've gone through consequential or by their fruits arguments, and we'll now talk a little bit about doctrinal-based arguments. So we're going to look at the family proclamation, church leader statements, and scriptures. Go ahead and start with the family proclamation. I ask a question: does the family proclamation forbid same-sex marriage? What does the text say? It says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that marriage is ordained of God. Let me suggest that there are 4 possible reasons why the family proclamation does not explicitly forbid same-sex marriage. The family proclamation does not explicitly forbid same-sex marriage. Reason number 1: the family proclamation is not doctrine. Of course, there could be a whole presentation on what is and what is not doctrine. President Lee taught that the only one authorized to bring forth any new doctrine is the president of the church. Then look, there are 3 requirements. When he does so, he will declare his revelation from God. That's 1. It will be accepted by the council of the 12. That's 2. And then it will be sustained by the body of the church. That's 3. Where have we seen this pattern before? Well, there was the manifesto of 1890 in regards to polygamy. There was the lifting of the priesthood ban in 1978. Both of those follow that pattern. The president declared it as revelation from God. It was accepted by the council of the 12, and it was sustained by the body of the church. The family proclamation was not sustained by the body of the church. Therefore, at least arguably, it is not binding doctrine. Reason number 2: the family proclamation on its face does not prohibit same-sex marriage. It says that marriage between a man and a woman is ordained of God. That doesn't mean that marriage between a woman and a woman is not also ordained of God. The example here, of course, the comparison: a square is a quadrilateral, well, a rectangle can be a quadrilateral as well. So marriage can still be between a man and a woman. Same-sex marriage doesn't ban opposite-sex marriage. It could very well be that both same and opposite gender marriage is approved by God. Reason number 3: the proclamation in its text allows for adaptation based on circumstance. The clause is disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation. May I suggest that a persistent and predominant homosexual orientation, if ever there was one, is just such a circumstance, and that gay marriage is the individual adaptation that is called for. Okay, so we've talked about 3 reasons. This is the 4th, why the family proclamation doesn't explicitly forbid same-sex marriage. This one's going to take a little bit more of an explaining, so please stay with me. It's not always the most easy to communicate, but I'll try my best. The family proclamation's construction of gender is spiritual rather than physical. The reason I make that conclusion, if you take a look at the text, it says that gender is an essential characteristic. Hold on to that word essential, we'll come back to it. But it says of individual, premortal, mortal, and that eternal identity and purpose. Well, one thing we know from LDS theology is that before this life, we didn't have a physical mortal body. Thus, it must be spiritual gender, at least in this clause, if not also the entire family proclamation, that is used. Spiritual sex, when you're talking about male and female, is the bottom line, because there was no physical body to have a physical sex before this life. So hang with me, I'll show you why that matters. You can't measure shoe size with a thermometer. That's I kind of titled this subsection here. I'll come back and kind of help you make that make sense a little bit later, but we're going to look into this question. How do we tell somebody's spiritual gender? So you've got an individual in front of you. How do you know if that person is spiritually male or spiritually female? I'll warn you, there's going to be some graphic pictures. I've had a lot of anatomy and stuff. These things don't really bother me, but you may choose to avert your eyes or something. But generally, when we determine spiritual gender, well, actually, let's take a step back and let's take a look at physical gender. How do we tell if somebody's a boy or a girl physically? Well, typically it's just by appearance. We look at them, right? You say, well, is this person a boy or girl? And it's not really a conscious discernment that goes on, but subconsciously, you know, we're looking for long hair, we're looking for breasts and body shape, we're looking for facial features, etc. That give us a hint. Is this a boy or a girl? Some of you may be laughing. This is a picture of Pat of SNL fame. And the point of this character is that it's difficult to tell if this person is a boy or a girl. In fact, even when Pat speaks, it's still difficult to tell if it's a boy or a girl. So if we can't tell immediately upon appearance, what do we do next? Let me suggest that there are 3 tests that we typically apply. I remember asking my dad once, how do you tell if a cat is a boy or a girl? He says, well, the same way you tell if a person's a boy or a girl. I was like, okay. I pressed him, you know, how do you do that? Little kid, you know, asking a lot of questions. He says, well, you pull down your pants and then you can tell. And I think there's probably a couple chuckles going on right now as well, but oftentimes that's what we think is the hallmark of being male or female. You have a penis or a clitoris, a vagina or a scrotum. So we take a look at the genitalia. We'll talk about that. A couple other tests for determining if you're physically male or physically female. Take a look at your genes, or let's take a look at whether or not as an adult you form eggs or sperm. These are sometimes used in the broader animal kingdom as well. So, the next few slides we're going to take a look at sex determination. I don't want you to get lost in the details. I'll summarize as we go. But it's going to be important to see how the fetus and the embryo during human development in the womb goes from being male or female. A lot of times we think that as soon as we have conception, we're either a boy or a girl. That's not actually the case. In week 5, what you have is an embryo that is bipotential, meaning at week 5 during embryonic development, that embryo could go down a path of being either male or female. And the default path is female. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So, what do we know? We've got XY and XX, right? XX is female, XY is male. Well, on that Y chromosome of the male, there's a gene called the SRY gene. And that gene makes a protein, of course, and that protein causes a cascade of events and consequences which help that default. Remember, the embryo, 5 weeks, can be either male or female. By default, it's going to go down the female path. The SRY gene on the Y chromosome is going to make a protein that helps cause a cascade of consequences that brings it down the male type path. Okay, so this is how sex determination works. And there's a lot of different differences between males and females physically. On average, males and females have different brains, and of course, most obviously, they have different genitalia. We'll talk about that. So they start out with this genetic difference. As we talked about, you've got this embryo at about week 5 that can go down either the male or the female pathway. They're going to have plates of cells. If you can picture a piece of paper as being a plate of cells, if you were to fold it up, all along what's called the midline, you'd form a tube. That's oftentimes in embryonic development how a tube is formed. For instance, the urethra of the penis is formed by this sheet of cells that folds up. Well, if it doesn't fold up all the way, you've got a slit left, right? So if you look in that bottom right picture, you've got this slit where the cells are folding up like a piece of paper, but they don't quite touch, or they touch at the ends but not in the middle. That's where you get your vaginal opening. So this is sort of how the genitals develop in the womb. So we talked about this as well. The SRY gene is on the Y chromosome. It was what causes an embryo to go down the male path. You've got the same sheet of cells in the embryo that's going to turn into, respectively, male and female parts. So the same sheet of cells will either form the labia majora in females, or that same sheet of cells will become instead the scrotum in males. So they've got the same predicate structures. And again, as you can imagine, there's a lot of individuals whose genitals are, I guess, aberrations from the norm. I wouldn't say that they're wrong. They're normal aberrations, but they're not male type or female type stereotypically, meaning, so you've got, for instance, some people that have a partial penis and a partial clitoris. Again, you think of that midline, maybe they have a vagina as well as a penis. Maybe the penis is more pronounced than the vagina, but with 7 billion people and billions of births over the past number of decades, you can imagine you get about everything in between. So you got a picture here of hypospadias. Again, individuals that have a vagina and or partially a scrotum and a penis. You got pretty much every variation of having both or neither male and female genitalia in individuals. We've got a picture here. This individual on the left is a genetic male. Of course, looks like entirely like a female. This person has androgen insensitivity syndrome. But to summarize, again, don't want to get lost in the details, the bottom line is that the SRY gene on the Y chromosome causes the default bipotential embryo to go down the male type pathway. And anything that happens along there that's an aberration, as we would term it, you get people that are intersex, people that have, for instance, I put here male genes but female genitalia. They have male genes but both male and female genitalia. They have male and female genes. Got XXY or XYY or X nothing. You get a whole bunch of different intersex conditions. My quote here, nature doesn't draw any lines on us, we draw lines on nature. And if scripture many are familiar with 1 Samuel, it says that the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. And indeed, when it comes to physical sex, we do, I think, would have to confess that we look on the outward appearance. And remember, the relevance here, I'll tie it together, but the Family Proclamation construction of sex, even though it uses the word gender, it seems from the context they're talking about sex. Spiritual sex and physical sex are independent, since we didn't have physical bodies before this life. Okay, so we'll get to the bottom line here in a second. So discerning physical gender, how do you tell someone's a boy or a girl? If you look at them and they look like a boy, you say they're a boy. If you look at them, they look like a girl, they're a girl. If you can't really tell and you have a pat, well, you have them pull down their pants, look at their genitals. As we discussed, the genitals aren't always going to put everybody cleanly into bucket A or bucket B. Similarly, the genetics test and the gametes test are probably going to fail. We've got a couple other examples here. There's an individual that has breasts and a penis and scrotum, testicles. These individuals are true hermaphrodites, meaning they have both male and female secondary sex characteristics. And of course, there's a variety of different genetic predicates they may have. Again, X nothing, XXY, XYY, etc. Or sometimes they have XX with a translocated Y SRY gene. This is a picture of individuals. Some have testicles where the ovary should be. Sometimes the testicle in the ovary is positioned by the fallopian tubes descends. Sometimes it doesn't. Again, the bottom line here is that physical gender is not a cut and dried black and white case. Some of you may be familiar with Caster Semenya and Santhi. These are two runners who had their sex questioned. The person on the right set a record. Either that or got a silver medal, I can't remember which, but it was questioned whether or not this individual was in fact a woman. She was competing in the women's race. And the test revealed that genetically this individual is male, even though physically entirely female, at least on the outside. Okay, you got a lot of different intersex conditions. This kind of summarizes the table. One out of about every 1,700 births is neither XX nor XY, and those that at birth have a body which differs from the standard male or female appearance, 1 in 100. 1 in 100. Intersex conditions are not rare, but again, the point is not so much how rare intersex conditions are. The point is that intersex conditions exist, and since we base our discernment of physical gender on appearance, we know that this type of a distills. So what's the bottom line? The pull your pants down test didn't work, the appearance didn't work, The genetics test doesn't work because you got people that are in between. Gametes doesn't work for the same reason. Not everyone fits neatly into this boy and girl category. Okay, that's the bottom line. Now for why that matters. I hope you've been able to follow along so far. But most people, they're not intersex, right? I mean, 99 out of 100 at least, you can tell pretty instantly up front if they look like a male or a female. So I got this story from conference. Many of you will recognize it. I'll go ahead and read it. Years ago, I visited a school in Albuquerque. The teacher told me about a youngster that brought a kitten to class. As you can imagine, that disrupted everything. She had him hold the kitten up in front of the kids. It went well until one of the children said, "Is it a boy kitty or a girl kitty?" This reminds me of myself as a kid asking that same question of my father. Not wanting to get into the lesson, the teacher said, "It doesn't matter, it's just a kitty." But they persisted. And finally, one boy raised his hand and said, "I know how you can tell." And so the teacher said, "Well, you can vote on it." I usually get laughed when I tell this story, and as President Packer predicted going on, he says, "You may laugh at this story, but if we are not alert, there are those today who would not only tolerate but advocate voting to change laws that would legalize immorality, as if a vote would somehow alter the designs of God's laws and nature." Alter the designs of God's laws and nature. A law against nature would be impossible to enforce. For instance, what good would a vote against the law of gravity do? This is an intuitive argument, and it's been made explicitly here. It's been made by others. Again, kind of this argument that you can't change God's laws in nature. The assumption that's not written here is that God's laws in nature place everyone into a boy or a girl category. All of God's children come into this life as a boy or a girl. And of course in the church we assign a number of gender roles to whether you're a boy or a girl, including who you can marry, including whether or not you receive the priesthood, in addition to whether or not you go to elders quorum or relief society. So, let's do it. Let's have you vote. So you can't use a vote to alter the designs of God's laws or nature. Remember, this person on the left is a genetic male, phenotypically female. So from wherever you are watching, go ahead and raise your hand if you think it is a girl. Okay. Those in the digital audience who think it's a male, go ahead and raise your hand. And we could ask the same question to the individual on the right that has a penis, testicles, a scrotum, and breasts. Is this a male or a female? Now, at least some of you out there I know are saying to yourselves and shaking your heads, "I do not know." And that is my bottom line. We do not know a person's spiritual sex. And it doesn't just apply to the fringe cases. We have no basis to determine the spiritual sex of somebody. You could ask yourself, by way of comparison, what's the height of this person's spirit? We have a baby on the left. Or this legless man on the right. What is the size of his foot? What is his shoe size? Is it nothing? Is he a size 4? A size 12? Does it change? I think we have to admit that on all of these dimensions, the height of a person's spirit, the hair color of a person's spirit, the shoe size, the sex, we just don't know. One thing we do know, and this is the important logical point, if physical sex is ambiguous, as we've shown, we have no way to place everyone in bucket A or bucket B. It cannot serve as the basis for a judgment of an unambiguous trait. Remember, the Founding Proclamation teaches that spiritual sex is essential, an essential characteristic. So we know that physical appearance or genitalia cannot be the basis to determine spiritual sex because the physical discernment is ambiguous. But we know from the Founding Proclamation that there are no in-betweens. Gender is an essential characteristic. And so that's why physical appearance cannot serve as the basis for determination of the spiritual sex of a particular individual. So let's apply this to gay marriage. Okay, again, the point here, if you want to tell somebody's shoe size, you would need to get out a ruler, not a thermometer. And the point is, if you're trying to measure someone's spiritual sex, you can't base that determination by their physical appearance, which is overwhelmingly what we do, and it's not justified. So, to illustrate this dilemma, this tension, perhaps pretend and put yourself in the shoes of a bishop. You've got this couple. I told you about them before. They live in Colorado. They're dating for a year and a half. They fall in love with each other. They want to get married. They're both members of the church, but they want to get married by the bishop. So, does the bishop marry them or not? Well, what if Taylor looked like this? Female who's genetically male, got a physically male and physically female. So if you were the bishop, which of those three couples would you marry? Remember, this couple has fallen in love with each other and they want to get married. Do you perform the marriage? Well, in LDS theology, we think that that is a rather consequential decision, because if Jessica gets married to Taylor, that is grounds for excommunication if Taylor is, in our judgments, female. Whereas if Jessica marries Taylor, they are indeed candidates for exaltation if they make and keep the needed covenants. Now, as we talked about laboriously here, physical appearance cannot be the basis for the bishop's decision, again, trying to discern spiritual sex, since that's what matters according to the family proclamation. We don't reject just the fringe cases. We have to reject the very criterion. It would be as irrational as determining whether to go left or right based on echolocation. If you can't hear the echolocation from the bat, then that cannot serve as your basis. The example used earlier was shoe size and a thermometer. The reading on the thermometer will not help you to make a determination of shoe size. Those are rather disparate results, exaltation, excommunication. So, as a bishop, again, put yourself in the bishop's shoes. You've got two choices when Jessica and Taylor come before you. You can either marry every Jessica and Taylor that comes before you, or you can marry none of them. Of course, if we don't know spiritual sex, you've got a chance that you could be marrying opposite sex or same sex. But if you don't know, your choice is not to discern between the couples that come in front of you, because physical ambiguous gender can't serve as a basis for judging unambiguous spiritual sex. You either got to marry them all or marry none of them, because it would just simply be irrational. It wouldn't be logical to marry the one but not the other. Okay, so this is the fourth reason why the family proclamation doesn't necessarily and explicitly forbid same-sex marriage. I would make an additional argument, sort of a consequentialist one, and say, shouldn't the fate of these couples be based upon how they treated each other during their marriage, rather than the level of a hormone that was present in the womb of Taylor 20-odd years before? Because that's really what makes the difference between a bipotential embryo becoming what we consider to be physically male or physically female, is usually the level of hormone in the womb and a couple of other biological factors. Okay? Got the scripture here. I'll just read one verse, Doctrine and Covenants 29. Verse 35, Behold, I gave unto him that he should be an agent unto himself. I gave unto him commandment, but no temporal commandment gave I unto him, for my commandments are spiritual. They are not natural, nor temporal, neither carnal, nor sensual. And I would suggest to consider that verse in the context of natural, temporal, carnal, sensual bodies, and whether or not our commandments and how we treat each other are based on our bodies, or rather, more importantly, on a spiritual level. Okay? So, again, we're still here in the doctrinal argument section of the presentation. This is the third of four. We've talked about the family proclamation. We're going to keep on talking about doctrines, but talk a little bit more about scriptures. Okay? We'll go through here pretty quick. We know the Restoration scriptures are silent about same-sex marriage. Both the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and Pearl of Great Price. Some would say it's a pretty significant omission. A lot of people suggest in the church that the Bible condemns homosexuality. There's been other scholars that have written about this at great length. You can read about it in my book. Just suffice it to say that, at least from my review of the available analyses, none of these verses, either taken independently or together, support that proposition that the Bible condemns homosexuality in a way that we should find binding today. But of course, I wouldn't expect you to take my word for that. I would encourage you to analyze it, but we're not going to go into great depth on those right now since they've been analyzed elsewhere. Take a look at the Law of Chastity. Church Handbook of Instructions, Book 1. The Lord's Law of Chastity, legal and lawful marriage as a husband and wife. Interestingly, the Law of Chastity is one of very few standards in the church that is explicitly tied to an external legal concept. The Word of Wisdom doesn't turn upon whether or not heroin or marijuana or tea or tobacco is legal or not. They can be legal or they can be illegal. The Word of Wisdom will not be affected. But when it comes to the morality of sexual conduct, it's whether or not that conduct is marital, whether or not you are legally and lawfully wedded. You don't have to be married by the bishop. You don't have to be married in the church for your sexual relations with your spouse to be moral. They just need to be within marriage. So arguably, same-sex couples that are married legally are already substantively living the law of chastity. or at least it wouldn't take much of an extension to apply the law of chastity to married same-sex couples. Another doctrinal-based argument would be looking at precedents. Take a look at polygamy, take a look at blacks in the priesthood. There was teachings by LDS leaders that you had to be polygamously married in order to be exalted, as shown by the first statement, which was from Brigham Young Journal of Discourses. The second one comes from First Presidency Statement, saying it's not a policy declaration, but a direct doctrinal commandment from the Lord about the position in regards to black people not having the priesthood. So these are statements that are very permanent and seemingly irreversible, but as we know, the church's position on both blacks in the priesthood and polygamy was reversed, and it's not entirely outside of the realm of feasibility that gay marriage position will be reversed as well. And indeed, that's the bottom line. We've had a number of significant social positions based on marital status in the one and racial status in the second that have been changed, and indeed this one based on heterosexism versus homosexual relationships may be reversed as well, or arguably, as I purport here, reinterpreted, because I don't think it's a great extension from LDS theology to find a place for marriage. Also, we know the church handbook, we quoted at the beginning, the same-gender marriage section. The church handbook does not qualify as doctrine, instead it's considered to be policy. That's not binding. Another doctrinal argument, I bring this up, I didn't think it was a strong argument, but Chris Bigelow pointed it out in his article saying why Mormonism can't abide gay marriage, so I'll mention it briefly. It's kind of this gut reaction that gay sex is just gross, and so we can't accept it in LDS theology. I would note that I think wasabi, and eating wasabi and seaweed, I think is pretty gross, but I don't think that people that like wasabi and seaweed, when they eat such, are being immoral. And in a similar statement, Bill Bradshaw says, heterosexuals, they have a difficult time thinking about gay sex. He says that sexual conduct is deemed a private matter, so that the mechanics of lovemaking are neither prescribed nor proscribed. Thoughtfulness and sensitivity to the feelings of one's mate being the most important consideration. And I would note that to a lot of gay people, gay sex isn't unnatural or gross, just like some people like to eat wasabi, even though I think it's gross. Doesn't mean because I think it's gross that it's immoral for another. Additionally, again, we're here in the doctrinal argument section. I would note that there might be same-sex couples in heaven. We don't have any affirmative evidence to the contrary. Of course, appeal to ignorance doesn't establish the proposition. However, think about God. He's either going to be monogamous or polygamous. In the church, we've had a number of men and women that have died in polygamous relationships, a number that have died in monogamous relationships. So if we have to become just like God, one or the other of those groups has a lot of changing to do, right? Meaning that some of them are either going to have to take on additional wives or allow their spouse to take on additional wives, or some of them are going to have to divorce, as it were, from their polygamous spouses and only have one. If, on the other hand, God allows both polygamy and monogamy in marriage, you can be exalted in either condition, then we know there's at least some level of marital diversity, in which case God could be married to one woman or several women, and that would not preclude the possibility of the existence of same-sex couples in the celestial kingdom. Okay. Another analogy here, we've got the best example in the universe of the intersection of unity, commitment, and love. We might expect that, since that's sort of what Mormons think is very important about marriage, is its unity and the commitment and love in that relationship. We would expect that example to be between a man and a woman that are married, but instead it's between three males, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I think it's apparent from this example that same-sex couples do have great potential for love, commitment, and unity, which we consider to be a vital aspect of marriage. Another point, a lot of people argue that two males, since they can't reproduce here, cannot reproduce in the afterlife. As I've already noted, we're pretty close to being able to enable a same-sex couple to be the biological and the only biological parents of a child. If we can almost do that here, I have a hard time imagining that an exalted same-sex couple would struggle on the spiritual reproduction plane to be able to do a similar feat. Of course, I don't know. That's speculation. But if we do think that God makes spiritual offspring the same way that we make physical offspring, namely by sexual intercourse, we know that God has numberless children, so that means he has a pretty obscene amount of sex if he has to have sex at least once for each child. Also, we know that when God made Adam's body and breathed into him the breath of life, he formed his body from the dust of the earth. He breathed in breath in the nostrils. These forms of reproduction or creation don't sound very much like intercourse between a male and a female, and instead sound more similar to what we would expect to be possible between same-sex couples. And indeed, some would argue that the creation of Adam was performed by one, two, or perhaps more males. And this is about my last point, again, on the doctrinal arguments. And this is a very compelling one. You imagine this woman in the picture and her first husband. They were sealed. 3 weeks after they were sealed, the husband was killed in a car accident. So the question is then, should the woman marry? Should she remarry? And for a young man that would consider dating this woman, should they consider marrying her? Because those young men could instead marry a different LDS woman that they could be sealed to. Because if they get sealed to this woman, it could be that the first husband will be sealed to her in the afterlife, because obviously the husband did nothing wrong. He kept his covenants, and sealings are eternal, right? So the question is, who will the woman be sealed to in the afterlife? Both? Husband one, husband two? What about the kids? Will they be sealed to husband one, husband two, to the mom? I think that the answer to these questions is we don't know. But despite that ignorance, we still advise the woman to get remarried. We still advise the young men in the church to consider dating her and to have a happy family. We don't consider that lack of knowing about how that's going to work out in the afterlife as a prescription for forbidding marriage. And of course, that same principle applies to a same-sex couple. We may not know how their marriage is going to turn out in the afterlife, but we should still advise them to get married in this one. Okay? So we've talked about the church's anti-gay marriage stance. We've talked about consequential arguments by their fruits. We've talked about doctrinal arguments. Now we conclude. My conclusion, of course, is that Mormonism can abide gay marriage, and also I would say that Mormonism should abide gay marriage for many of the reasons that I've purported here. For greater depth, I invite you to read my book. You can watch it on YouTube. You can go to the links there on my blog, bradcarmack.blogspot.com, bradcarmack.blogspot.com. You can buy it if you want it hard copy. You can send me an email at homosexualityperspective@yahoo.com, homosexualityperspective@yahoo.com. And I posted my book in Scribd as well as in PDF form, which you can get at my blog. And with that, this has been Why Mormonism Can Abide Gay Marriage.